Hi, I'm Alina, and this is the story of how I learned that some people wear their deceit like a second skin, effortlessly weaving lies until you can no longer tell truth from fiction. For years, I believed I had a loyal friend and a brilliant business partner in Mark, but the bitter truth was, he was nothing more than a master manipulator, slowly dismantling everything I had built for his own gain. This is the story of how I exposed his carefully constructed facade and reclaimed my life and legacy. I still remember the day I met Mark. It was during my senior year of college, at a hackathon. I was a quiet, intense computer science major, focused on developing innovative solutions. Mark was a charismatic business student, always surrounded by people, his energy infectious. My project was a novel AI-powered platform designed to optimize supply chains, a complex system I'd poured countless hours into. Mark, with his quick wit and charming smile, immediately saw its potential. "Alina, this is revolutionary," he'd said, his eyes gleaming. "You've got the brains, and I've got the drive. Together, we could change the world." Naively, I believed him. We decided to co-found Synapse Innovations, a tech startup aimed at disrupting the logistics industry. The early days were exhilarating. We worked out of my cramped apartment, fueled by instant coffee and big dreams. I handled all the technical development, coding late into the night, refining the algorithms, and building the infrastructure. Mark, with his eloquent pitching skills, secured our first seed funding from angel investors. He was the public face, the one who charmed investors and clients, while I was the quiet force behind the scenes, turning abstract ideas into tangible products. My parents, practical and hardworking, were cautiously optimistic. "Just make sure you protect yourself, Alina," my dad would say, a hint of concern in his voice. "Business can be a tricky game." But I dismissed their worries. Mark was my friend, my partner. We were in this together. Our company grew rapidly. Within 2 years, our AI platform was gaining traction, praised for its efficiency and cost-saving capabilities. We secured major contracts with mid-sized logistics companies. And our team expanded from just the two of us to 20 dedicated employees. Mark, ever the showman, reveled in the spotlight. He was constantly giving interviews, speaking at conferences, accepting awards. "This is a true partnership," he'd always say in his speeches, conveniently glossing over the fact that he barely understood the code I wrote. I, on the other hand, was content to let my work speak for itself. I believed that true innovation was its own reward. The first hint of trouble came subtly. Mark started taking more credit in public, subtly shifting the narrative to emphasize his visionary leadership and strategic genius, while my contributions were downplayed as merely technical execution. Then came the financial irregularities. Small at first, just an unexplained expense here, a missing receipt there. When I questioned him, he'd dismiss it with a wave of his hand. "Just typical startup chaos, Alina. I'll sort it out." He always had an excuse, a charming smile, and a promise to rectify it. And I, wanting to believe the best in my partner, let it slide. After all, he was handling the finances, leaving me free to innovate. 3 years into Synapse Innovation's success, we were poised for a major Series B funding round. This would take us to the next level, valuing the company at over $100 million. That's when Mark decided to bring in his cousin, Liam, as the new chief financial officer. Liam was a smooth talker, with a background in obscure financial instruments. "He's a genius with numbers, Alina," Mark assured me. "He'll streamline everything for the funding round." I had a bad feeling about Liam from the start. His eyes were cold, calculating, and he always seemed to be exchanging knowing glances with Mark. But Mark insisted, and as the CEO, his word carried weight. With Liam at the financial helm, the irregularities became less subtle and more systemic. Large sums were reallocated without my knowledge, detailed financial reports became increasingly vague, and access to certain accounts was restricted. When I confronted Mark, his demeanor shifted. The charming smile was replaced by a steely gaze. "Alina, you need to trust us," he'd said, his voice laced with an unfamiliar edge. "This is big business. There are things you, as a tech person, just wouldn't understand." His words stung, but I pushed harder. "I understand the numbers, Mark. And these numbers don't add up." He simply shrugged, his expression unreadable. Then came the meeting that changed everything. It was a pre-funding meeting with a major venture capital firm, our biggest opportunity yet. Mark had orchestrated it, emphasizing its importance. I arrived early, excited to showcase our latest platform upgrades. Mark and Liam were already there, looking unusually tense. As the VCs settled in, Mark cleared his throat, a theatrical flourish before his grand announcement. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice booming with confidence, "Synapse Innovations is on the cusp of something extraordinary. And to lead us into this new era, I'm proud to announce a significant restructuring of our leadership." My heart hammered against my ribs. Restructuring? What was he talking about? Effective immediately, Mark continued, his eyes sweeping over the room, intentionally avoiding mine, "I will be taking on the role of sole CEO. Liam, my trusted CFO, will be appointed as COO. This move will provide the unified, decisive leadership that a company of our scale demands." A cold dread washed over me. This wasn't just about restructuring, this was about sidelining me. "For too long," Mark added, his voice dripping with false concern, "our operational efficiency has been hampered by, shall we say, a lack of cohesive strategic vision at the top. While Alina has been instrumental in the early technical development, her focus has remained too narrowly on the coding aspect. To truly scale, we need a leader with a holistic business perspective, someone who understands the intricacies of the market, the investors, and the future of this company." The VCs exchanged polite glances. I sat there, stunned, as Mark continued his thinly veiled attack. "Some people," he said, now looking directly at me, a condescending smirk playing on his lips, "are simply better suited for technical roles. Alina's talent lies in her algorithms, not in leadership. Her old-fashioned ideas and lack of comprehensive business understanding have become a liability. It's time for her to gracefully step aside from any executive decision-making roles." The room was silent, the air thick with unspoken judgment. Every eye was on me, waiting for my reaction. I could feel the pity, the schadenfreude, the silent condemnation. Everything I had built, every sleepless night, every ounce of passion I had poured into Synapse Innovations, was being stripped away in a single, brutal announcement. My mind raced, a whirlwind of anger and disbelief. Mark had orchestrated this, painstakingly, meticulously. The financial irregularities, Liam's appointment, the vague reports, it all clicked into place. They had been systematically isolating me, preparing for this moment. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the polished floor, the sound echoing through the hushed room like a gunshot. Everyone expected a scene, tears, an outburst, maybe even a desperate plea. Instead, I simply picked up my laptop, walked to the head of the table, and calmly placed it in front of Mark. "Consider this my official resignation, Mark," I said. My voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil raging inside me. "You can tell the VCs that the technical genius just walked out the door." Then, without another word, I turned and walked out, leaving behind the stunned silence and the calculating stares. That night, as I sat in my now empty home office, surrounded by the awards and patents that bore my name, I made a decision. Mark thought he had one, but he had forgotten one crucial detail, something that would turn his moment of triumph into the biggest mistake of his life. As I powered up my laptop and began typing, a small, grim smile played on my lips. Tomorrow would be interesting indeed. After all, there's more than one way to innovate in the tech world, and I had learned more in 5 years of building a company from the ground up than Mark had learned in all his charming pitches and business school lectures. The next morning would bring changes that none of them saw coming, changes that would make them realize exactly how indispensable I really was. The next morning dawned bright and clear. I arrived at the Synapse Innovations office building early, before anyone else, and waited. Precisely at 9 a.m., Mark strode through the front doors with Liam by his side, both wearing triumphant smiles that were about to be wiped from their faces. Alina? Mark's voice held a mix of surprise and annoyance. What are you doing here? I thought after last night you'd have the dignity to stay home. I smiled, remembering the email I had sent at 3 a.m. to every major client, partner, and employee of Synapse Innovations. Just wrapping up some loose ends, Mark, dear, I said sweetly. But since you're here, we should probably talk about the company's future. There's nothing to discuss, Mark interjected, his voice firm. Liam and I are in charge now. The board has already approved it. Ah, yes, the board, I said, pulling out my tablet. Let's talk about that. You see, while you were busy charming investors and accepting awards, I was actually building this company. And there are a few things you both seem to have forgotten. I pulled up a document on the conference room's main screen. First, let me remind you that I own 51% of Synapse Innovations shares. When we incorporated 5 years ago, you, Mark, received 25%, and I, as the primary intellectual property holder, received 75%. Remember that day, Mark? You were too busy preparing for your keynote speech at the Tech Summit to review the incorporation documents carefully, so you just signed them without reading. The color drained from both their faces. Liam's eyes widened, and Mark's perfectly coiffed hair seemed to droop slightly. That's impossible, Mark whispered, his voice barely audible. I would never have agreed to that. And that's not all, I continued, pulling up more documents. The core AI platform that generates 90% of our revenue? It's not owned by Synapse Innovations. It's owned by my separate company, Quantum Logic LLC. Synapse Innovations only has a licensing agreement, which expires, I checked my watch, about 10 minutes ago. Mark collapsed into a chair, his face slack with dawning realization. The renewal papers, the ones you asked me to sign last week, the ones you were too busy to read because you were preparing your takeover speech? Yes, those papers. I said. I decided not to submit them. Liam's face contorted with rage. You conniving little, careful, Liam, I cut him off. You might want to hear the rest before you finish that sentence. While you were busy announcing my supposedly graceful exit last night, I was sending emails to our clients. You see, most of our major clients have personal loyalty clauses in their contracts. They signed with Synapse Innovations because of me, my algorithms, my support, and my track record. Last night, I informed them of the leadership changes and my departure. I pulled up my email, showing dozens of responses that had already arrived. Would you like to know how many have already triggered their contract termination clauses? Or how many of our top developers, who, by the way, are actually employed by Quantum Logic LLC, have already accepted positions at my new venture? The room fell silent. Through the glass walls, we could see employees gathering, whispers spreading as they checked their emails. Mark's perfect composure cracked as he frantically checked his phone. You can't do this, he stammered. The company you tried to steal from me, I finished for him. The one you thought you could just take over because you have a charming smile and a silver tongue. That company ceased to exist the moment you decided to humiliate me in front of everyone we know. I stood up, smoothing my dress. So, here are your options. Option 1, I walk away with my shares, my software, my clients, and my employees. Synapse Innovations becomes an empty shell, and you can explain to all those important VCs and business associates you invited last night why the company's value dropped to zero overnight. Mark's face had aged 10 years in the last 10 minutes. And option 2, he asked weakly. Option 2, you both resign. I take full control of Synapse Innovations. You keep your shares as silent partners, receiving a small percentage of dividends, but having no say in operations. Liam gets a nice severance package and glowing references for his next job somewhere far away from here. Liam's face had turned an interesting shade of green. You planned this all along, didn't you? You've just been waiting for the right moment to stab us in the back. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. No, Liam. I spent 5 years trying to be a good partner while you both took me for granted. I built this company from nothing while you collected accolades for my work. I only planned this. I checked my watch again, about 12 hours ago, after you called me worthless in front of everyone we know. My phone buzzed, another client termination notice. Time's running out. What's it going to be? The next hour was a blur of paperwork and lawyers. By noon, I sat alone in what was now truly my office, looking out over the city. The company I had built was now unequivocally mine, but the victory felt hollow. Trust shattered like dropped crystal. My parents came to see me that evening, their faces etched with concern. Did it have to end this way, Alina? My mom asked softly. They gave me no choice, Mom, I replied, my voice gentle but firm. They would have taken everything I built and discarded me without a second thought. My dad nodded slowly, understanding but sad. What happens now? I showed them the plans I had already drawn up, expansions, new product lines, innovations. I had been holding back. Now, I would build something even bigger, but this time, I'd do it without having to carry people who saw me as worthless. Over the next year, Synapse Innovations, under my sole leadership, quadrupled in value. Mark found a new venture, but his reputation was permanently tarnished. Liam, his career in shambles, disappeared from the tech scene. We see each other only through rare, awkward encounters at industry events, maintaining a polite distance that masks the wounds that may never fully heal. Sometimes, late at night, I look at old photos of Mark and me from our early startup days and feel a twinge of sadness for what we lost. But then I remember that morning in the conference room, the look of disdain on Mark's face, the way he dismissed my years of hard work. In business, and in partnership, respect is earned, not given. He learned that lesson too late. As for me, I learned that sometimes, the quiet ones, the ones dismissed as merely technical or behind the scenes, are the ones you should watch out for. Because we're the ones who know how to build something from nothing, and how to take it all back when others try to steal it. My story spread through tech circles, a cautionary tale about underestimating the wrong person. These days, when I attend industry events, I often catch whispers, that's Alina. The one who, they never finish the sentence, but they don't have to. My success speaks for itself. Last week, I received an invitation to speak at the very same venture capital firm that witnessed Mark's failed coup. The topic? The unseen architects of innovation. I accepted the invitation with a small smile, already planning my speech. After all, I have quite a story to tell. The company continues to thrive under my leadership, but more importantly, I've found peace with my decisions. Sometimes, the strongest message you can send is simply proving people wrong. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't about destroying others, it's about rising so high that they can't help but see their own mistakes. As I write this from my office overlooking the city, I'm reminded of something my dad once told me: success is the best revenge, but wisdom is knowing when to stop seeking revenge and start seeking growth. He was right. I've moved past the need for revenge now. These days, I focus on building something meaningful, something that will outlast all the petty jealousies and betrayals. I still keep a small, framed photo of the initial Synapse Innovations logo, a reminder of where I started and how far I've come. Until then, it serves as a reminder that our greatest strengths often come from the very things others underestimate about us. Hi, I'm Alina, and this is the story of how I learned that some people believe they're entitled to your dreams, that your hard work is merely a stepping stone for their ambition. For years, I poured my soul into nurturing a small, struggling local bakery into a beloved community staple, only to watch my cousin, Leo, try to snatch it away. This is the story of how I baked a sweet revenge and reclaimed what was rightfully mine. I still remember the scent of warm bread and sugar from my grandmother's bakery, Alina's Sweet Delights. It was a tiny shop, nestled on a quiet street, a place where generations of our family had poured their love into pastries and cakes. After my grandmother passed away, the bakery struggled. My parents, both with full-time jobs, considered selling it. But I couldn't bear the thought. I was a culinary school graduate, brimming with new ideas and a deep reverence for tradition. "Let me try," I pleaded. "I can turn it around." They agreed, reluctantly, and I became the sole manager. My cousin, Leo, a year older than me, scoffed. "A bakery, Alina? That's small time. You should aim higher." Leo was always about aiming higher, about grand gestures and cutting corners to get there. The early days were exhausting. I worked from dawn till late evening, experimenting with new recipes, revamping the menu, and tirelessly promoting the bakery on local social media groups. I introduced artisanal sourdoughs, custom celebration cakes, and a range of gluten-free options that quickly gained popularity. I even started a weekly Bake for a Cause initiative, donating a portion of our sales to local charities, which resonated deeply with the community. Slowly but surely, the bakery began to thrive. The sweet aroma of success was finally in the air. My parents, who had been skeptical, were now beaming with pride. "You've done wonders, Alina," my mom would say, her eyes welling up. Our reputation grew beyond the neighborhood. Food critics wrote glowing reviews, and customers would drive for miles to sample our signature chocolate lava cake. Within 3 years, Alina's Sweet Delights was no longer just a struggling local shop. It was a flourishing business with a loyal following, boasting a steady stream of catering orders and a line out the door every weekend. That's when Leo suddenly became very interested. He had been floundering in various get-rich-quick schemes, none of which had panned out. One day, he showed up at the bakery, looking unusually serious. "Alina, this place is amazing," he said, his eyes scanning the bustling shop. "You need a business partner, someone to handle the expansion. I've got contacts, I've got ideas. We could turn this into a franchise." I was wary. Leo's ideas usually involve shortcuts and little regard for quality. But he was family, and he painted a compelling picture of rapid growth and even greater success. Plus, I was overwhelmed. Managing everything myself was taking its toll. I swallowed my reservations and, against my better judgment, agreed to make him a partner, handling marketing and business development. I retained full creative control over the recipes and kitchen operations, believing that was enough to protect my vision. The next 2 years were a bizarre dance of progress and undermining. While I focused on maintaining the quality of our products, And fostering our community ties, Leo was busy making grand promises he couldn't keep. He inflated catering bids, signed contracts with questionable suppliers for cheaper ingredients, and began making unilateral decisions about branding that diluted the bakery's wholesome image. He'd charm new clients with lavish promises, then leave me to deal with the fallout when our kitchen couldn't meet his unrealistic deadlines. When I confronted him, he'd always have a plausible explanation, a cunning way of twisting the facts to make it seem like I was being unreasonable or narrow-minded. "Alina, you're too focused on the small details," he'd say dismissively. "You need to think bigger, like me." The first major red flag appeared when our long-standing, trusted flour supplier called me directly, confused about a sudden cancellation of our regular order. When I asked Leo, he claimed he'd found a much cheaper, better quality supplier. The new flour, however, visibly impacted the texture of our bread. Our loyal customers noticed, and complaints began trickling in. When I confronted Leo with the evidence, his usual charm evaporated, replaced by a cold, calculating glare. "Alina, you're just resistant to change," he snapped. "This is a business, not a charity. We need to maximize profits." Then came the grand anniversary celebration of Alina's Sweet Delights, marking 5 years since I took over. Leo, of course, insisted on turning it into a lavish affair, inviting local dignitaries, food bloggers, and potential investors. He rented out an expensive banquet hall, far too large for our usual modest celebrations. I arrived early, feeling a knot of unease in my stomach. The air was thick with the scent of cheap perfume and Leo's self-congratulatory aura. He moved through the crowd like a king, basking in the attention, while I, dressed in my chef's whites, supervised the catering, ensuring every dessert was perfect. During dinner, Leo clinked his glass and stood up for a speech. I expected a nostalgic tribute to my grandmother, perhaps a brief mention of my hard work. Instead, he dropped a bombshell that would shatter my trust and legacy forever. "As we celebrate the incredible success of Alina's Sweet Delights," he began, his voice booming with feigned humility, "I think it's time to announce some exciting new developments. The board, myself and a few key investors, have agreed that the bakery needs a singular, forward-thinking vision to expand." My blood ran cold. The board? What investors? For too long, Leo continued, his eyes sweeping over the room, intentionally avoiding mine, our growth has been hampered by, shall we say, a certain reluctance to embrace modern business practices. While Alina has been adequate in maintaining our grandmother's traditional recipes, her focus has remained too narrowly on the kitchen. To truly become a national brand, we need dynamic leadership, someone who understands large-scale operations and strategic partnerships. The room murmured, a ripple of whispers spreading through the elegant hall. I sat there, stunned, as Leo continued his thinly veiled attack. "Some people," he said, now looking directly at me, a condescending smirk playing on his lips, "are simply better suited for the creative side, not the executive decision-making roles. Alina's talent lies in her baking, not in leading a multi-million-dollar enterprise. Her old-fashioned methods and lack of formal business acumen have become a liability. It's time for her to gracefully step aside from any management responsibilities." A wave of nausea washed over me. I looked at my parents, who were sitting at a nearby table, their faces pale with shock. "The truth is," Leo continued, his voice rising, "Alina, you're simply not equipped for this level of business. Your sentimental attachment to outdated traditions and your limited understanding of market trends have become a hindrance. It's time for you to step aside gracefully, and let me take the reins." The silence in the room was deafening. Hundreds of eyes turned to me, waiting for my response. I could feel the pity, the judgment, the silent condemnation. Everything I had built, every sacrifice I had made, every single drop of sweat and passion. I had poured into Alina's sweet delights, was being stripped away in front of everyone I knew. My mind raced, a whirlwind of anger and disbelief. Leo had orchestrated this, meticulously, cruelly. The questionable suppliers, the inflated bids, the secret board, it all clicked into place. He had been systematically undermining me, preparing for this very public execution. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the polished floor, the sound echoing through the ballroom like a gunshot. Everyone expected a scene, tears, an outburst, maybe even a desperate plea. Instead, I simply walked to the dessert table, picked up a perfectly crafted slice of our signature chocolate lava cake, and calmly placed it in front of Leo. "Enjoy your dessert, Leo," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil raging inside me. "It might be the last one you taste here." Then, without another word, I turned and walked out, leaving behind the stunned silence and the lingering aroma of my grandmother's legacy. That night, as I sat in my now empty bakery kitchen, surrounded by the familiar tools of my trade and the fading scent of baked goods, I made a decision. Leo thought he had won, but he had forgotten one crucial detail, something that would turn his moment of triumph into the biggest mistake of his life. As I powered up my laptop and began typing, a small, grim smile played on my lips. Tomorrow would be interesting indeed. After all, there's more than one way to run a successful bakery, and I had learned more in 5 years of hands-on experience than Leo had learned in all his superficial schemes and shady dealings. The next morning would bring changes that none of them saw coming, changes that would make them realize exactly how indispensable I really was.